Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. Today you have Emily again, and I thought a topic that I've kind of wanted to do is sort of questions that might be asked to somebody with DID, and I thought I would take a shot at some of those questions, and hopefully it can be helpful or informative to somebody. They are all going to be from my personal perspective, so the way I experience my DID, and if there are any others, it's going to be from my knowledge, from things I've experienced, just to bear that in mind. And let's crack on. So the first question I found these either online, so Google's most asked questions, or things that people have asked me and us actually in person. So the first question is, what's switching like? What does switching feel like? Those sort of questions. Now this one is really hard. I've started with almost the hardest question, because unless you experience it yourself, it's very difficult to get an idea of what it really feels like, but I will do my best. So there's kind of two ways I can explain it. If you've ever passed out, and you know the feeling, ignoring the sick feeling, ignoring, your body messing out, the feeling of everything sort of closing in, and sort of the feeling of you moving backwards. It's quite difficult to explain, but as you're on the brink of passing out, there's that sort of feeling of sort of almost sinking backwards. At least it can be to some people. I'm trying to find the best way to explain it. Also, if you're dropping off to sleep, so if you're really tired, like you've done something crazy the day before and you are worn out and you're supposed to be studying or concentrating the next day, and it's really hard to stay awake, there's that sort of feeling of dragging, of sort of like pulling you backwards. I say backwards because it's all internal, it's all inside your head. It's not physical, but it feels like there's sort of a sinking, moving backwards sort of. It's as if losing consciousness is moving away from the front, moving away from you being actively looking out of your eyes and being aware. So switching feels like that. To me, it's not distressing, it's not scary, and it doesn't make me sick or anything like that. But it feels like the bit before you fall asleep, where you're just falling backwards and you're just relaxing and sort of letting yourself drift. It feels like that is the best way I can describe it. That's what it feels like to let somebody else front. So that's what it would feel like for me now if I was to let one of my alters out, because I'm in the front, I'm the conscious person. So what it feels like to then come back to the front, it's like that, but the other way around. Now, this is where it gets even more complicated for us anyway. I'll use an example. I can feel that somebody is close, that somebody is sort of sharing my sort of brain space. I can feel that someone's there. Now, I'm not always certain who it is, so I will give them space. I will let myself switch back. So for that person coming forwards, it can be a bit tricky to sometimes know who it is, but it feels like waking up. It feels like, I guess, sort of in a way, it feels like getting dressed or walking out your front door. It's like opening a door and stepping out. It's stepping into consciousness and being aware. And sometimes that can be instantaneous. That can be, as quick as that. It can be, the most common is with Pepper. And she might hear a song she likes or see her partner, and we give permission. She can very, very quickly switch, and then it will be her in front. It can also take quite a long time, sometimes a really long time, depending on which altar. So we're in that situation, the person who is leaving the consciousness, for example me, I would probably curl up, lie down, or if that's not possible, if I'm in a public place, I will sort of lean on something, because then it means that we don't have to concentrate and worry on the physical body. We can be more focused on having a nice transition. It's a lot easier for the person who's coming forwards to do so if they're not having to worry about, keeping themselves upright and balanced and all of these things. If they're able to just be internal and know who they are, take that step forwards and slowly get used to awareness, get used to consciousness, and get used to touch and sight and sound. All of those things can be a little overwhelming when a switch first happens, for these longer switches. And that's usually for us, for altars that are not around very much. So it sort of it varies who's around when. But if they haven't been around for a couple of days or weeks, it will take them a little bit longer to come to the front. I hope that kind of explains a little bit about what it feels like. You feel somebody come close. It's almost as if they're sort of knocking on the door and saying, I'm really awake right now. Can I have some time? And I let them in and I leave the room. If you can envisage that in your mind and sort of imagine that and how that would feel, that's what it feels like for me personally anyway. It's quite a long answer, and I can always go into more detail about switching or about the internals maybe another time, but that's the best answer I can give to how it feels. Yeah, so I will move on to my second question. And that's again quite a tricky one, which is who dreams? Do you get to choose who dreams? Dreaming, how does that work? For me and our system and everybody here, it's mostly me, mostly Emily that dreams. I will wake up in the morning and just remember the dreams. They are a little bit, if you think about your own dreams, they're not necessarily always from your point of view, or about, you don't usually see yourself. So in some ways I don't know who dreams, but I remember them in the morning, because typically Emily, me, I'm the one to wake up in the morning, and I think that might be to do with waking up next to Luke. But I don't know, it could also be because I am the main altar. So sometimes I will distinctly remember that it is a dream from one of my altars. It will be sort of from their mindset, how they view the world. For example, again, I'll just use Pepper because she's closest. Her sort of dreaming perspective is a lot more bubbly, a lot more energetic. She will choose to do different things than I would, and she will care about different people in different ways. So sometimes I can specifically know whose dream it is. I've had Lucy and Pepper dream, but I don't remember if anybody else has dreamed. I could be completely wrong, but those are the two that I know have dreamed besides me. But most of the time it is me that dreams, but sometimes they will get dreams of their own. And it doesn't necessarily tie in with whoever was out before we went to bed. So Lucy had a dream when she hadn't been out for a couple of weeks. So that's a little bit about dreaming. You know, you don't usually see yourself in dreams, so I couldn't tell, you know, who dreams exactly, but that's you know, the best answer I can give. Question number 3 is, how do we communicate? These are all quite internal, tough questions to answer. I've picked the questions that I think maybe would be the most interesting. I don't know. Anyway, how do we communicate? It's, again, quite a tricky one. It depends. Again, all these vague answers. It depends on how close they are to the front. Sometimes when it's with somebody who's further back, who isn't as awake or aware and hasn't been around for a couple of days or weeks, I can sort of get an idea of an answer to questions. So if it was, say, can I borrow your dress, Autumn? Because she has some really nice dresses. And of course she would always say yes, because she's a lovely person. But I always like to check in with people anyway and make sure they don't mind. So if I ask her, can I borrow your dress, for example, and she's far back, it's almost like she's sleeping, I can still, if I use her name, get some kind of an answer. It won't be necessarily words, but it'll be sort of like a positive feeling or a negative feeling. Is the best way I can describe it. It's as if you feel something yourself, but you know it's not come from you. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. Again, you'll have to bear with me. If they are close to the front, and they are almost co-conscious with me, I can ask them directly, and I will get almost a thought. It's not particularly easy for me to communicate this way, so it's usually something that I have to ask them, or sometimes they want to put in their input about something that I'm doing, and I will sort of hear a thought. Now, I don't know how everybody else experiences thoughts, but you can tell when it's your thoughts and when it's somebody else's thoughts. And this is kind of the way that I first experienced alters, or as I thought back then, spirits. It's a thought will bubble up that is not your own. So I know that there is such a thing as cognitive dissonance. There are plenty of crazy thoughts that your brain will have that you can't control, that might just pop up, and you know, you can have arguments with yourself about should I, shouldn't I, you know, there's a lot that goes on in your mind that are your thoughts but aren't necessarily deliberate or conscious. But these are different. These are thoughts that are from somebody else. The way that I can describe things the best that happen in my head is with texture. They just feel different. And every altar has a different sort of feel. Again, I know that's difficult to understand, but you can't tell unless you've experienced it, and you just sort of feel these thoughts come forwards, and then I identify who sent them, and that's one of the other ways we can communicate. I think those are pretty much my only two ways. Sometimes I can feel like I say what they would say. For example, if I wanted to borrow Autumn's dress, I know she would say yes because she's lovely. But so that's knowing the person and knowing what they would say, but that's not exactly asking them. So those are the two ways that I find that I communicate with my alters. I personally have never written to my alters. That is something that other systems do, especially if they suffer more with amnesia. They can write a note or address their alter, and then their alter, when they're next out, can read it. And it's a way of sort of writing letters to each other. And that's a really good way of starting to communicate with your alters, especially if you don't have, as good of a communication yet. It's something I could have done early on, but I didn't think about it back then. So this is, I've gotten to a really good place now where we're usually able to communicate quite easily. The only time that's different is with alters that are not as keen. I have only had this experience once, and my alter doesn't want to be named. They don't want to be known about, so I will keep that private for them. But alter X, we'll call them, X didn't want to be part of system, didn't want to have anything to do with this, and so would hide a lot, and it was difficult to tell anything about them. And so I could not ask them, I couldn't communicate with them, I didn't know what their texture was, I couldn't, even find out what their name was. So communication internally does require a level of friendship in a way, or at least a kind of relationship with your alters. So with X, it is something potentially that I could do, would be to write letters to them. But over time, X has sort of softened up and realised that, that this situation is how it has to be, and there's nothing that we can do to, each have our own body. And they're just sort of coming to terms with that, and they have started to communicate better. But that I'm just sharing that experience because I understand that, again, other systems, other people experience alters who can sometimes be not very pleasant, and won't want to communicate with you. So I could only share from my experience and the ways that I communicate with my alters. Perhaps in future I can do more research and speak to more systems and maybe bring some deeper insight into their experiences. However, I can only share with you mine at the moment. So that was question number 3. So moving on to question number 4, which is a lot simpler, a very much shorter question, but it was one I was asked, which is, who's engaged? Now, some of you might just know this answer. Me, Emily, I'm engaged to Luke. He is my partner and he has been for 7 years. And that's as simple as it gets. Me, Emily. None of my other alters are engaged to marry him. There's only one other alter that I have that's in a relationship with him, but they are not engaged. So individuals in a system can have, like I say, relationships, and me as the host, as the main, I am in a relationship with Luke and we are engaged to get married. No other person in my system is getting married. Also, legally it's not a thing, but I mean, potentially if things were to work out or to work in a different way, systems that are very supportive in that way could have individuals marrying other individuals if they wanted to, but it just wouldn't be like a legal thing. So I hope that kind of answers it. Fairly simple. Question number 5 is, do you pick when your alters front? So do I pick who is co-conscious or the closest to the front to switch with me? The answer to that question is no, I don't pick. I don't think any system really can. It's very fluid and not within your control as to who is around and who is awake. And for example, I've said this in the past, Nick is around a lot, but Pepper is not always at the front. She's sometimes further back, and it's just how it is, you know, especially I know with my system that we can't control it, and sometimes Nick will want to spend time with Pepper, but she's just not around. I can't force her to wake up and come forwards. I think I've said in the past that calling their name can wake them up, but sometimes it can't, and I don't usually like to do that anyway, because I like to keep things as natural and comfortable as possible. If you call on somebody a lot to bring them forwards, it can be fine, but also it can be just a bit uncomfortable and sort of staticky feeling. So no, you can't control it. Well, I can't control it. We can, you know, for example, Pepper and Lucy are around quite often, and sometimes if Nick has a day off and Luke is working that day, Pepper will try to be as close to the front as possible so that she's able to switch and come out for that day. That seems to work sometimes, but not other times. They, you know, it feels like they can try to be conscious for certain times, but it's never a hard and fast rule. It's never, you know, I can be like, aha, I need this person out, aha, this person out today, unfortunately. But again, if, for example, for a video or for educational reasons or for any other medical reason, whatever, if I needed to, I could call them forwards, take time, let the switch take a little bit longer, make sure everybody's okay, check in and get a specific alter out. But again, I usually don't like to do that, but it is possible with our system, I think maybe because we've communicated quite well, and also I have alters such as Ren, who's a good middle ground. They are very good at helping other alters come forwards and feel comfortable, feel reassured and relaxed when they come forwards. I think that's why they're so good with my youngest alter. So they can help with that easing of, you know, if they were called on to come out, for example. But again, don't like to do that very much. Usually it's very, very fluid, and we can't always choose. Even if I were to call on somebody, they might not wake up. So that's been 5 questions. 5 questions, and I hope they've been interesting. I hope I've been able to explain some things in a way that you can understand, and potentially I might do another set of 5 questions in future. So please, I know I don't want to be that YouTuber, but if you give it a like, that will help me a lot. And thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Have a lovely day, and thanks very much for watching. Bye!